Angela. Good morning. Thank you for being with us.
Hey, Ange.
I want to start with you, Angela. Tell me this and break it down for us here. What should progress look like for the NFL?
Well, before we talk about progress, we have to acknowledge what is currently happening. As you just showed on the screen, just like the Flores lawsuit, there is a Facebook of white faces. So of the 9 vacancies, 6 have been filled. They are with white men. And I think that goes to the exact point in the lawsuit. The NFL, now with this statement, is clearly taking a page from Fat Joe. With modifications, they're saying today's statement isn't yesterday's statement. So we know that when the lawsuit was released, they said that Brian Flores' claims were without merit. Well, now they're saying that perhaps there is some merit, right? And I think we have to acknowledge that them saying the results have been unacceptable, particularly as it relates to head coaches, isn't really sufficient because it's also denying the fact that there's an offensive coordinator's issue and there's a defensive coordinator's issue. And in some people's minds, this rises to the level of GMs and vice presidents and other executives, et cetera. So progress looks like real change. One of the first things they need to do is evaluate the fact that there's another Facebook page in Flores' lawsuit. There are no Black owners in the NFL. A lot of this won't shift until ownership and people in positions of power also change. One thing that they do in corporate America that's very popular around diversity, equity, and inclusion is tying executive pay to diversity and inclusion deliverables and metrics. So if you don't deliver diverse candidates, not just to interview like the Rooney Rule says, but also to ensure their hiring and their retention, which is also a major NFL problem, you get docked in pay. You don't get your bonus or your pay has some type of a hit. I think in addition to that, one of the things that we have to acknowledge as well is Roger Goodell doesn't have a whole lot of power over the owners. And so one thing that the NFL could build in are penalties. They have to call a flag on the play at some point. Otherwise, bad behavior gets reported. There has to be a penalty for what they're doing wrong.
Angela, I
I'm
appreciate.
trying to think about.
Hold on, Michael.
Go ahead, Steve.
I appreciate what you said, Angela. What I would say, and I just want to make sure that I ask you this question, and I alluded to it when we were on the air together Friday, and I'll bring it up again. To me, the mistake that the NFL made in its clapback at Brian Flores' civil lawsuit was it's without merit. We and our clubs. They made a huge mistake in saying that. If they had omitted the words, our club, and just said, we, the league office believes that would have been a different matter because they would make the argument that they're doing and they're pushing for all the things that you have alluded to. The owners are not capitulating. The owners are not complying. These same owners that okayed and endorsed the implementation of the Rooney Rule in 2003 are not following their own mandate per se. So when I look at the statement that the NFL just put out, to me, the NFL is essentially clarifying that, oh, we're good, but we need y'all to step up. That's how I read it. You didn't read it that way?
Well, I think that you raise a great point, and I think the biggest issue they have is what they said on in that initial statement on February 1st, which is these claims are without merit, right? It's very clear just on data alone that there's merit for these claims. And that's why they had to go back to it because they know that even, and you talked about this when we first spoke about this, Stephen A., that when you look at the NFL leadership in the actual organization, it is very diverse. But that diversity is not reflected anywhere else except for on the football field. So that is what they have to be accountable for. The other thing is, again, going back to where positions of power lie, where people are responsible for making decisions, if that is not in the hands of the NFL organization, they have to have some type of accountability structure built in with the ownership. If they do not, guess who's going to be liable in these lawsuits, just like the clubs? The NFL organization. And that's exactly what they're trying to clean up. They're trying to clean up liability, and they can't.
Yeah, and I agree with both you guys in some of the things that you're saying. And the reality is, we were looking right at it. Brian Flores brings out this lawsuit, and then the next 2 days we're hearing about Josh McCown about to get this job. and everybody went in uproar. So I thought the NFL should have said we're looking into these things and spoke like Stephen A. said, hey, in this office we're doing all that we could. But our eye gate is seeing that they're failing. You know, when right now, when the Rooney Rule started, they had 3 head coaches as African American, and now you have 1. And we could talk about the multiracial guys getting jobs, but as Stephen A. talked about earlier, we're talking about black faces here. We're talking about African Americans getting getting some opportunities when you have over 70% of the league being African Americans. It's about reaching those owners that make the decision. I would ask this. I was trying to figure out, how do you incentivize people by paying them or docking pay in a sport like the NFL, and a meritocracy? I think that'll be some waters to try to navigate and be some difficult waters. But absolutely, they have to stand up and make it right.
Let me say this.
Yeah, and I
go ahead,
think,
Angela.
I
Go
think
ahead.
this is the part, you know, when you go back to what Brian Flores recommended in the lawsuit, it's very clear. He talks about who has to sit at the table in hiring decisions. They have to be willing, as Roger Goodell said, they're going to go back, they're going to make some evaluations, they're going to change some things. There has to be real change. There have to be hiring committees set up. There have to be retention committees set up, right? They have to build in a bonus structure that would allow for the very thing you're talking about. Yeah, it's going to ruffle some feathers, but if they don't go about doing it this way, we're going to have the same problem over and over again. And whether we're talking about it after a Black Lives Matter protest, after there's another George Floyd, God forbid, it's going to be the same thing. And they can't throw money at this to get people to keep quiet. They can't. Brian Flores stepped up with the courage. They have to step up with the change.
And I want to highlight one of your earlier points, accountability structure with ownership and potentially penalties. And I appreciate you, Angela, giving us concrete examples of what can be done. Angela will be with us quite a bit the rest of the season, and it's great to have you. I know we welcomed you last time, but to the ESPN family, we'll say it again for people just joining us. All right, we'll leave it there, guys.